Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hey, y'all, welcome back. This is episode 16, and it is one of the hardest principles for me to navigate and reckon with, and that is that you already have everything you need. I don't want you to misunderstand that statement by thinking that it means that you're already complete. You can just give up and walk away now, and you'll be complete, and nothing else really matters. But there is this really unique challenge, I think, that comes to us. Like the process, the goal, in my opinion, of spiritual development, the process is one of steady and slow peeling away of the things that are not you, that aren't true, that have stuck to you, whether that's based on how you grew up or what you've learned so far or your experiences. And in time, as we begin to peel away and shed all of those identities and experiences and baggage and, stuck traumatic responses, all of that stuff, as all of that stuff begins to fall away, there is this pure, true self that is remaining. And I believe that that pure, true self is our spiritual identity. In the yoga tradition, this is called the Atman, has some other names sometimes. But the belief is that Atman, that true spiritual self, is like a shard, a fragment of the divine whole. And if we can return to that place that already exists inside us, then we experience this union and completion and connection, not just to the great source, the spirit, the mystery, but also to every other being that is also the same essence. It's like realizing we are a drop of water that comes from the ocean. That that water might have been separated from the ocean, but as it returns, like we are united with every other drop in that ocean, and we have an inevitable connection to each other. And the process of peeling away all of the veils and all of the crud and the mess that is in the way of that, and of remembering that, is at its core the blood, sweat, and toil, the work, the real work of spiritual practices. So in the Yoga Sutras, which is one of the traditional texts of yoga, classical yoga, the very first few lines say that the yoga is the stopping, the cessation of this constant changing and turning, and vrittis is the word that is used. The constant repetition and shape-shifting and reforming of the mind, right? And, the sweet translation of that is like when the mind is still, we can experience a state of yoga. And so many of us approach these yoga practices like, okay, if I can just make my mind stop, then something magical will happen. And it's a simple, simple concept. When the mind is still, then the true self can abide in its nature, right? That once we can, let all of this garbage fall to the side, all that's left is what's true, right? I said this the other day in the interview, the conversation with Bear A. Bear, that in many ways, spiritual life is just a process of discovering what's true and surrendering ourselves to that rather than what we want, right? Our previous illusions, our misunderstandings, all of those are the things that get in the way. We often are really attached to those misunderstandings. We are often really emotionally or intellectually attached to the way things have been or the way that we need them to be. And I'm not talking here necessarily about our aspirations for the world or for ourselves, right? So an example might be, this is a perfect example. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I decided I wanted to be an actress. And that was what I believed would be true. I had daydreams about going to New York and being on Broadway. I remember having conversations with friends. I had, when I was a ballet dancer in junior high, Erin and I, my best ballet friend, we would talk about how we were going to go to New York and share a tiny apartment, and she was going to be a prima ballerina and I was going to be an actress on Broadway. And I continued to follow that path, putting all of my energy, right? I was like taking acting classes and I was the president of the drama club and I was in shows and I applied to and went to a college almost explicitly because of how excellent its theater training was. And I got a great training, right? I got a great degree in theater. But I was always moving forward with this assumption that that's where I was going to be. I wanted it. I believed it was true. And something happened when I was in college and I had some realizations about the reality of the world and of the profession. And I won't bore you with all of those details, but it made me realize that I didn't actually want that thing in reality. I had been attached to it in its idealized form. But when I really began to reckon with both my type as an actor, right? I was always a character actress. I was never going to play an ingenue. And so being 20, not a lot of character roles for 20-year-olds. But also like how little control and influence and power, for lack of a better word, professional actors had over the kind of creative work they did and the messages that sent. So as I developed, as I grew and learned more and was open to the world, I was able to soften my grip on this idea that I had had of who I was going to be. Now, there were 5 or 6 more processes exactly like that. I got really attached to the next idea and then really attached to the next idea. But in each moment, I had to sort of let go. And I always think about it like a gumball, right? Or like a jawbreaker, right? Right? That it's got those outer layers and they slowly melt away and they slowly melt away and they slowly melt away. And I now expect that to continue to happen. I am no longer expecting to know exactly where I will land. And I know that like each of those things have carried me forward. And that each of those things, it's like the direction has gotten me closer to where I want to be eventually. And what is true for me. And unless we can release our attachment and allow those old ideas of ourself to fall away, we can't get closer to the truth. So that's one piece of this work. But the other piece is a very common metaphor in many, especially in mystical writers. St. Teresa of Ávila and Rumi both talk a lot about, St. Teresa talks about the interior castle. And the concept of the interior castle is that until I stop looking outside for this magical connection with the divine, I cannot discover that the doorway has been here all along. And Rumi talks about this like a treasure hunter. He has a number of poems and short prose about, going in like these huge adventures in search of this treasure that we believe to be somewhere else. When in fact, when we come home, like we dig under our own house, and the treasure has been there all along. You can probably think immediately of 1,000 fairy tales, right? Where like this is the moral. The moral of the story is it was here all along. And maybe we've heard those stories and made something else of them, or we hear them so often that they just go in one ear and out the other. But this notion that what we are looking for is inside us is what is at the core of this principle, that you have everything you need. You already have everything you need to experience the pure connection that you're seeking, to sit with a sense of abundance, of completion, of purity, of connection, and perhaps even of joy and bliss. I sometimes wonder if I'm always seeking that joy and bliss, but I would like to arrive at a sense of completion and purity and deep, unalienable connection to Source. The common misunderstanding of this, and of many of us on a spiritual adventure, is that we think that we're gonna have some kind of spiritual awakening and like a shield, right? Or some kind of like heavy, thick armor. Our outer self is gonna fall away and we will emerge as someone different. It's one of the reasons that I don't always love the caterpillar butterfly metaphor when it comes to spiritual discovery and awakening, because that reinforces this idea that like we go in as a caterpillar, it's like stingy and kind of weird looking and I don't know, creepy, and then we melt and completely dissolve into something else, and we are reformed into something completely different that is actually beautiful and magnificent, and yes, it is made of the same cells and the same things, but the shape is completely different. I think that reinforces in us the idea that who we are right now is incorrect, and that where we will arrive eventually is going to be completely different and magnificent compared to our current form. Now, it might feel completely different, and hopefully it feels magnificent, but every spiritual teacher I have ever learned from reinforces this sense that like you don't become something other than who you already are. You just allow everything that's not you to fall away. The metaphor of the sculptor, right, who sees the block of marble and immediately in the block of marble sees the sculpture, and the purpose of sculpting and of chipping away is simply to move everything that is not that magnificent work of art. But that work of art has been there the whole time. This is the hard and grueling work of our spiritual practice. I'm not going to lie. It is not some like easy, like go take a shower and then you get to become your best self. But it's when I think of words like self-actualization, which has too many syllables and is too intellectual for me to really understand it, to get it in my heart. So I like words like becoming and being self-possessed, maybe even self-sovereign, although I think that also is a little too intellectual. What we are looking for is the deepest, truest connection to who we are without any mask, without any shadow. When we allow all of our shame and guilt, resentment, regret to fall away. When we are no longer afraid of being our fullest, most powerful self. When we have dropped our sense of fear about failure, about getting it wrong or making a mistake. When we can simply be ourselves. And simple is the word. Again, not easy. The challenge, the real challenge of this particular concept, this principle in our current world is everywhere we look, we are getting reinforcements that this is not actually what's happening, that that's not true. And I could just blanketly blame capitalism and, capitalist overlords, but I think that lets everybody off the hook too easily, actually. Inside of any commercial world, right? Like commerce is like where we're trading goods and services for resources, right? For shells or shekels or dollars or gold, whatever it might be, right? We're in an exchange. And in that process of exchange, you have something that I want and I have something that you want, right? And we trade those things. That's an ideal world, right? But in order to be in a place where it's like, wait, I want something. I want something outside of what I already have. And some of that is like necessary. That's like food and shelter and clothing. But over time, and when I say time, I mean millennia, that system has become so complex and so intricate and so advanced that we have all internalized some idea that there is something outside of us that if we could just acquire it, it would fix whatever is wrong. Right? I'm going to say that again. We have this internalized belief that there is something out there that if we could simply have it or receive it, then we would be okay. And that has to sit on top of an assumption that we're not okay already. It has to. And there are some ways that is true, right? It's like, if you are starving, if you are in mortal danger, if you are unhoused, if you are unclothed, like there are lots of ways that, like, yes, we do actually need things outside of ourselves. We cannot just, become breatharians. But we took that and expanded it outward to, if I can have this job, once I have this job title, once I can become a director, then I'll be okay. Once I meet my partner and fall in love and get married, then I can be happy. Once I have a child, right, then I'll really understand how to love. This placing our happiness, our contentedness, the peacefulness of our soul on something, experience outside of us, that is the sickness, I think, that we're all afflicted with. And I put myself in that number. And I have to constantly remind myself how okay I am right now. And one of the reasons I think that this practice is especially challenging is that all I have to do is open up a web page or, open up a YouTube or listen to a podcast or go outside. Like, we are surrounded by advertising everywhere we go, surrounded by advertising so much that like it just like, it doesn't even get us in a conscious way. If you were to count the number of advertisements that you receive in the next 24 hours, I think you might be stunned. You might lose count. And each of those advertisements is selling something, whether it is an actual product or service, or an idea, or an identity. And each of those things that is being sold to you must sit on an assumption that you're missing something, that there's something that you don't have that they can sell to you for $19.95 plus shipping and handling. And then you will be happy, contented, at peace, joyful. It's a real mind fuck. Excuse my language. It's really, it's real. And so our practice must be consistent and ongoing because those outside messages are also consistent and ongoing. The outside messages that say you're not thin enough, pretty enough, healthy enough, you don't have enough friends, you're not successful, your body is wrong, your work is wrong, you need a new toothpaste, right? Your smile is the gateway to the world. I mean, whatever it might be, there are so many messages that we are receiving now, almost subconsciously, that we're missing something. That the reminders that we already have everything that we need, actually. We already have all of the internal tools and drive and ambition and intelligence and heart and courage and capacity for practice and attention that we actually don't need anything from outside of us. Now, this is complicated too, right? Because what we really have, each of us internally, are sort of like the raw materials for awakening. We all have the capacity to do the practice. We all have this inner, I think somewhere, an inner tug, an inner pull towards something. And we may not even be able to name it. We may not even know exactly what it is or what's at play all of the time. But that drive to become more, to get closer to ourselves, to find some sense of joy, to feel connection, to relieve suffering in our own lives and in the world. All of those, I believe, are inherent. And I believe that all of those are actually presence of the divine living inside of us, like a little arrow directing us in where we should go. So if I go all the way back to the story that I told you about becoming an actor, that the internal drive, this like longing that existed inside of me was true. And that longing to become is still inside me. That longing that was driving me to do that work and to refine my craft and to seek out teachers and to read and to study and to watch other performers and to learn about the theater and to work with other people. All of that was effort that I had to put forth, right? Obviously, I was doing all of that. But that internal pull is what was there all the time. And I did not create it. I am not in charge of it. I cannot eliminate it because I'll tell you it's still here. That internal longing to become is still here. And the way that I feed that longing is different now than it was 20 years ago. But I promise you it's still there. So again, as I said in the very beginning, you already have everything you need. But also, because real work must be done to slowly peel away whether that's personal, emotional work, things like journaling and reading and learning and maybe working with a therapist or things like that. But also like real spiritual work of practice and meditation. And for me, that's mantra practice and singing and my yoga practices, my asana practice sometimes. Like there's a wide range, breath work. All of these are tools that I use to peel away everything that's not true. I want you to think for a moment about someone you know, whether it's someone you know in person or that you've met in the past or you know from afar, who feels really self-possessed to you, right? You like walk into a room with this person and they just have a sense of not needing anything from anyone around them. And yet that not needing is not a sense of aversion to other people, right? It's not like fearless self-reliance. It's like an openness to whatever arrives, right? There's a curiosity about the people around them. There's a willingness to engage and to learn more about other people. But that sense of like hunger, like I need something from you, or how do I get this thing? There's none of that. And they also seem to have this sense of like, I know who I am. Not an arrogance. It actually might feel a little humble, right? An acknowledgement of, you know, true self. And you also have this intuitive sense that they're not lying, right? They're not playing at somebody. They're not pretending to be somebody that they're not. They simply have arrived and are a true expression of themselves. You ever met anybody like that? That's where we're going. The magnetism of people like that is undeniable. People who simply are themselves, unabashedly, unafraid, but also without needing to announce it. This is what I mean when I say self-possessed or self-sovereign. And it's, in some worlds, we don't know what to do with people like that because, like, in a commercial sense, like, what do we sell them? Like, what do they want from us? What do they need from us? And again, they are not shut down or closed off. There is a sense of openness, a sense of interconnectedness, and a healthy exchange of ideas inside of a relationship. They're funny usually and kind. I want you to notice the next time you are in the company of someone like that and use them as a study. Use them as an evaluation tool, right? Like what is it about them? Get curious. Maybe you ask them some questions about what their background is or what their history is, or if they have a spiritual practice, because I can almost guarantee you that they do. That is who we are becoming when we engage in these spiritual practices and on this spiritual journey. And again, it doesn't mean that we are divorced from each other. It doesn't mean that we don't have relationship or community once that happens. Once we have discovered who we are, right? It is an ongoing process of becoming. But that pull, that inner longing, is actually all you need. So everything you need, you already have. It's all here within you. The thing that you are seeking, that treasure, is buried inside your own house. May you have so many blessings on your path. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.